Do you believe that a wild animal could help a woman find a reason to live again? There are encounters never planned, yet they change the course of a life forever. On a cold, rainy night on the edge of the Oregon forest, a woman who had lost everything pulled over for a small, trembling creature caught in the storm. She thought she was rescuing a stray cat, but no, she had just opened the door to a wild soul. In this video, you will witness a true story about the strange and beautiful connection between humans and nature. A healing journey, subtle and moving, told through glances and tiny footsteps. And the most beautiful kind of farewell, when true love means letting go, not holding on. But before we dive into the details, let me ask you, if a wild animal entered your life, would you choose to keep it or set it free? Clara Monroe, 52 years old, used to be an art teacher at a high school in Seattle. All her life, she believed in beauty. The beauty of light, form, silence, and the empty spaces waiting to be filled with color. But then came the accident. Her only daughter, Lily, died one rainy afternoon on her way home. After that, Clara stopped painting. Not because she didn't want to, but because her hands wouldn't obey, trembling each time they faced a blank canvas. She sold the old house, left the city, and moved to a small wooden cabin on the edge of the Oregon Reserve, a place filled with wind, leaves, and absolute silence. She told people she wanted to find inspiration again. But in truth, she just wanted to disappear. For almost a year, she lived like a shadow, cleaning, brewing tea, sorting through old paintings, but never once picking up a brush. Until one cold, rainy night, her headlights cut through the thick downpour, lighting up the muddy dirt road leading to the weathered cabin perched beside the forest's edge. Clara Monroe gripped the steering wheel tightly, her pickup truck shuddering in the autumn wind. She hadn't planned to go out that night, but she'd run out of tea. Tonight, she needed something warm. Near the third bend, something moved just at the edge of her vision, quiet as a leaf caught in the wind. A creature staggering through the rain. Clara slammed the brakes. The tires slipped slightly on the wet ground. She didn't have time to think. She simply opened the door, ran out, and knelt by the roadside. Under her flashlight, two eyes reflected the beam from a low bush. A small creature, soaked and shivering in the rain. Clara leaned closer, extending her hand slowly. She whispered, as if speaking to a frightened child. "It's okay. Don't worry." Something in those eyes made Clara stop breathing. Not from fear, but from a feeling both strange and familiar, as if her heart recognized something before her mind did. It didn't run. Maybe it was too weak. Maybe it had given up long ago. After a few patient minutes, Clara gently wrapped the tiny creature in a wool blanket and brought it home, to her cabin, to the place that once held a family of 3, now just her and unfinished canvases. Under the yellow light of the living room, she dried the grayish-brown spotted fur, her hands trembling as she felt each bone jutting beneath the skin. No collar, no sign of humans. A stray kitten, so she thought. Maybe it was a sign, a gift from the forest, or from someone she had lost. Maybe it was time Clara no longer had to live alone. Its name was Theo. Clara had read every guidebook, every wildlife report Jonas had brought her. Bobcats cannot be tamed. They are born to hunt, to be independent, to live without bonds. But Theo seemed to be the exception. Maybe because it was too small when she found it. Maybe because it had nearly died in the rain, and she had been the first warmth it felt in a cold world. Whatever the reason, it bonded with Clara in a way that defied instinct, a pure trust she sometimes didn't even find in people. And yet, there were boundaries that couldn't be erased. Theo had wiped out all the mice around the house, a fact Clara was grateful for, but also deeply unsettled by. One bite, clean and precise. Not a kitten's play, but the strike of a biological assassin. The sofa in the living room was now in shreds. 2 new curtains, hung only a week ago, were torn to ribbons. Then came the incident with the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Mildred, who lived nearly a kilometer away. One rainy afternoon, she appeared on Clara's porch, furious, trembling, holding out a dead chicken. "What on earth are you keeping in your house, Clara? What kind of animal bites straight through the neck like this?" Clara didn't know what to say. She simply bowed her head, apologized, paid for the damages, and even helped Mrs. Mildred rebuild her chicken coop. But deep inside, she knew. Jonas was right. Theo was growing, and its instincts were not waiting. Jonas had called twice that week. Each time he asked, "When are we taking him back to the wild, Clara?" She avoided the question. Her heart wouldn't let go, even though her mind knew. To love is to let go. Then everything changed on another rainy night, just like the one when she found Theo. Clara was painting in the living room. For the first time in months, she could sit before the easel without crying. Then Theo suddenly froze. Its small body went rigid, ears pivoted toward the window, eyes locked on the darkness outside. Clara turned off the lights, quietly stood behind the curtain. Out there was only gray rain, nothing but wind. Then lightning slashed the sky and she saw it. A full-grown bobcat, standing tall at the edge of the yard, its soaked fur shimmering silver in the flash. Its eyes, emerald green, lit up, locked onto the cabin. Clara's heart clenched. It was 3 times Theo's size, but the resemblance was uncanny. Another flash of lightning, and it vanished as if it had never been there. But Theo didn't move. Frozen, still staring at that same spot. Then it made a sound Clara had never heard before. Rough, low, almost like a call. Clara stepped back, trembling. In that moment, she knew. It was Theo's mother, and she had come back for her child. Clara didn't sleep that night. She just sat silently in her chair, watching the window, as if waiting for something inside her to break. The next morning, she called Jonas. "It's time," she whispered. "I can't keep him anymore." Jonas returned early the next day, his pickup truck pulling up in front of the cabin, bringing with him 2 specialists from the Oregon Wildlife Conservation Center. One was Lauren, hair neatly tied, eyes sharp but not cold, carrying a track meter and a thick map marked with potential bobcat routes. The other, Joe, was quieter, his hand always resting on his backpack strap as if ready to act at any moment. No one said much. They nodded to Clara, then walked to the backyard, where the earth was still damp from the night's rain. They crouched, studying every paw print, small and large, sometimes comparing with measuring tools and printed field references. Clara stood on the doorstep, clutching a warm cup of tea, its heat unable to steady the trembling inside her. From that distance, she heard Jonas say something quietly to Lauren, and Lauren nodded. A moment later, they turned toward her. "There are clear tracks," Lauren said. "An adult individual returned at least 3 times. Based on behavior and timing, it's highly likely. That's Theo's mother." Clara felt as if someone had just pulled all the air from her lungs. Even though she had sensed it, even though she had seen it with her own eyes, hearing someone else confirm it still made her heart tighten. "We'll install infrared cameras around the area," Lauren continued, her voice professional but gentle, as if speaking to someone standing at the edge of something sacred. "If it is the mother, we can initiate a reunification plan and identify a safe zone where both can be released back into the wild." Clara nodded, but said nothing. She feared that if she opened her mouth, everything would shatter into tears. Jonas stepped over, gently placing a hand on her shoulder, like an old friend who understood that sometimes the best comfort was silence. Inside, the early morning light slanted through the window, falling across the couch where Theo was sleeping, curled up like a tiny puffball, breathing steadily, ears twitching softly as if in a dream. dreaming of the forest, of his mother's shadow, or of those afternoons spent resting his head on Clara's lap. No one could know. But Clara knew one thing: their time together was coming to an end. Tomorrow, if everything went well, Theo would return to where he belonged, to his mother, to the forest. Clara looked down at her hands, noticing the cup of tea had gone cold. A ray of warm light brushed across her face, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel pain anymore. Only emptiness. A kind of emptiness that felt peaceful. She turned back into the house, sat by the window, watched Theo sleep, and for the first time she dared to whisper to herself, "You came to help me repaint my life, and now I will let you paint the next chapter in the forest." Clara knew it was the right thing. Jonas and the conservation team had prepared everything: the transport crate, the lightweight tracking device that would be attached to Theo, not heavy enough to bother him, but strong enough to tell her he was still alive, still running, still being himself where he belonged. And yet there was a faint fracture in Clara's heart. Not loud, just a quiet emptiness, like the sound of night wind slipping through cracks in an old wooden door. That night, she decided not to lock Theo upstairs as usual. This would be their last night together. Free, just like the early days. Clara prepared a special meal: fresh beef from the most trusted butcher in town. After eating, Theo lay beside her on the sofa, the very spot where he had slept during those first rainy afternoons. Clara turned on the TV, a wildlife documentary. When the screen showed a bobcat stalking prey, she chuckled softly. "What a coincidence," she whispered. But Theo didn't laugh. He stared at the screen as if seeing himself in a mirror. Rain began to fall. Clara drifted off without realizing, until a hoarse sound jolted her awake, not a meow, but something wilder, rougher, a low growl full of warning. Theo stood at the back door, body tense, ears angled outward, claws lightly pressing into the wooden floor. A scratching sound echoed, slow, deliberate, as if someone were knocking directly on her heart. By instinct, she grabbed her phone and snapped a photo of Theo in that stance, partly to preserve the moment, partly because of a deep sense that what was about to happen could never be described in words. "Easy now, sweetheart," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. But Theo didn't move. The scratching came again, this time louder. Clara felt her heart pound against her chest. Not from fear, but from a primal intuition, a forgotten instinct humans rarely access. Something bigger was drawing near. She stepped slowly toward the wooden cabinet near the window, opened the creaky door. Inside, covered in dust and time, lay her husband's old rifle, something she had kept not out of desire, but out of a need for some sense of safety in a world so close to wilderness. Clara had no intention of using it. Never. But she understood. Nature isn't always gentle, and if the situation became dangerous, she needed to be ready, not to attack, but to defend the final line. Hands trembling, she took the gun and stepped toward the back door. Her finger brushed lightly across the light switch. Click. A dim yellow bulb lit the soaked wooden porch, casting a shimmering circle of light, with the rain reflecting like thousands of falling stars. And then she saw the eyes. The first and only thing her brain registered before anything else. 2 emerald orbs, cold, deep, alive. They didn't blink, just stared. Straight at her, a fully grown bobcat. Larger than any she had ever read about or seen in documentaries, its fur is slick with rain, water dripping from chin to chest. But nothing about it was messy. On the contrary, every hair, every muscle beneath the wet skin was breathtaking in its wild beauty. It stood there at the edge of the porch, no more than 10 steps away. No growl, no hiss, no crouching as if to pounce. It hadn't come to fight. It had come to look at Clara, at the house, at what it had lost, and maybe what it had found again. Clara stood frozen. Her throat tightened as if someone were squeezing it shut. She didn't know if she was breathing or had stopped altogether. In the perfect silence, broken only by the pattering rain and the wind slipping across the roof, Clara felt time stop. Everything around her dissolved into the dark, leaving only three beings orbiting one another: herself, Theo's mother, and Theo. A movement. From behind her, Theo appeared, quiet as a breeze, stepping with damp, careful paws. He didn't hide behind Clara, didn't hesitate, didn't fear. He stepped forward. Between the human who had raised him and the creature who had birthed him, Clara stepped back, not from fear, but from reverence, like stepping out of a painting's frame so that the light could fully fall on its true subject. Theo stopped, then let out a sound, rough, youthful, but instinctive. Not a meow, and no longer the cry of a domestic animal. It was a wild sound, raw, echoing something ancient buried deep in the forest's memory. The adult bobcat lifted its head slightly, replied with another sound, deeper, like wind brushing through roots. And in that moment, Clara knew. No confirmation needed. No science. That was Theo's mother. A cry rose from Theo's throat, weak but unmistakably a greeting. Across from him, the adult bobcat answered, low, raspy, almost like a whisper from the deep woods. In that moment, Clara understood. No matter how much she loved him, no matter how tightly she held on, Theo had never truly belonged to her. He was the product of 1,000 years of survival, a being woven from the wind and the scent of the forest. And there was his mother, his beginning. Clara stepped back slowly, eyes never leaving the two figures on the porch. They didn't growl, didn't panic. They just stood there, watching each other. A reunion without words, built on instinct alone. And when Clara closed the door, she could still see the image clearly through the glass, a creature she had rescued and the one who had given him life, meeting again in silence, like a fairy tale told through rain and light. The adult bobcat looked at Clara through the glass, its gaze wary, but not aggressive. In those moss-colored eyes, Clara couldn't tell if it was real or her imagination, but she saw something unmistakably human. Curiosity. And perhaps a kind of understanding. As if it knew she hadn't stolen its cub, but only kept him safe, while he was still trying to find his way back. When Clara shut the door, her palms were still trembling slightly. The mother and cub remained on the old wooden porch, beneath the dim light and the soft patter of rain. She picked up the phone. Jonas. Her voice was hoarse, little more than a whisper. They're still here, still looking at each other, like they're speaking the forest's own language. Don't do anything, Jonas said. This is a rare chance. The mother found her cub. We need to document this moment. We'll be there right away. Clara sat still, daring only to peek through the curtain. She picked up her camera and carefully took a few photos, not to keep for herself, but to remember that she had once witnessed something sacred. 2 hours later, Jonas arrived with Lauren and the conservation team. They moved silently, as though even a single sound could shatter the fragile thread between nature and humankind. A large 2-compartment crate was prepared, baited with fresh meat, and placed a little way from the house, beneath the trees where the mother bobcat often stood. We'll keep them together, Jonas explained. Attach a tracker to Theo, then release them deep into the forest, far from any homes, near a stream and a known hunting range. Clara nodded, but couldn't take her eyes off Theo. He, the small creature who used to curl up at the foot of her bed, now stood beside his mother as if there had never been any distance at all. The capture happened faster than expected. Theo's mother, either from hunger or instinctual trust, stepped into the first compartment, and Theo, pulled by an invisible thread, followed into the other within seconds. The doors closed softly, silently. Neither struggled. By morning, everything was ready. Jonas turned to Clara, eyes gentle. "Would you like to come? To say goodbye?" Clara said nothing. She only nodded, her eyes full of tears. The road into the forest was rugged, the truck bumping with each turn. Clara sat in the back beside the large metal crate. She gently placed her hand on the edge, not touching Theo, just a silent touch, as if her heart were whispering, "Thank you for being here." They reached a lush green valley with a stream, stone caves, and ancient trees embracing the land like open arms. A place so beautiful it hurt to look at, worthy of a new beginning. Lauren attached the GPS tracker to Theo, light as a leaf. It would fall off naturally as he grew. A small red dot would appear on a map, a reminder for Clara each day that he was still running, still alive, still being himself. "Clara, are you ready?" Jonas asked, his hand resting on the crate door. She took a deep breath. She had thought she would prepare a farewell, but now words felt too small. How could she tell a wild animal that it had brought a part of her back to life, the part that died with her daughter? That on nights when Theo curled beside her bed, she had, for the first time in years, not felt alone? She couldn't say it. She could only smile. Jonas opened the door. Theo's mother stepped out first, graceful as wind through grass. She didn't run. She simply stood, lifted her head, breathed deeply, as if claiming her territory once more. Then she turned back and waited. Theo hesitated for a moment, then followed. They paused at the edge of the forest. Then both turned around. Clara swore Theo's eyes sought hers, as if offering an unspoken farewell. And then, in a single blink, they vanished into the trees, leaving behind only the sound of falling leaves and an emptiness without shape or name. On the way back, Clara said nothing. No one did. The pickup rumbled gently over the uneven road, stones crunching beneath the tires like eggshells cracking underfoot. On the seat beside her, in her hands, was the small tablet Jonas had handed her before parting. Light, thin, yet heavy as though it carried the whole world. Clara had once been too afraid to touch. "Whenever you want to know where he is," he had said, his voice deep and warm like pine wood, "just open this. That red dot, that's Theo." The red dot, a tiny point, but the last pulse connecting Clara to that creature, the one who had entered her life like a late rain and left like the first sun after a storm. As the truck turned onto the familiar path leading back to the wooden house, Clara still said nothing. She only clutched the device in her hands like a mother holding the breath of a child gone to war. The wooden door opened, the chill of the room touching her heart before her feet crossed the threshold. The house was quieter than ever. No more soft paw steps brushing across the floor. No more gentle breathing echoing through the night. No more amber eyes watching her from the window each morning. Everything returned to the definition of shelter. No longer a home, just a house. Clara hung the wet coat on the hook and walked into the kitchen. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of old habits, boiling water, pouring tea, picking her favorite mug, the one with a tiny crack Theo had scratched while playing. She sat down by the table, sunlight slanting through the old fogged glass. The soft morning light wrapped around her shoulders like a silent embrace. She opened her laptop, placed her fingers on the keyboard, hesitated. A blog, a book, a letter to someone who would never reply. She didn't know, only that she had to tell it. She had to tell the world, or at least herself, about the tiny creature soaked in midnight rain who once entered this house, curled up at the foot of her bed, and slowly redrew her heart with claws, with breath, with the low growl of the forest. And when Clara opened the tablet, the connection lit up. A faded satellite map appeared, and a red dot. It was moving, slowly, but steadily. Crossing the trail, weaving through the trees, following a small stream. Exactly the way a bobcat travels. Quiet, unseen, leaving no sound behind. Clara gently touched her finger to the screen, as if afraid it might startle him. "You're still alive," she whispered. "Still going." She turned to the window. The sun was breaking through. After endless days of rain, like the sorrow that had stretched through her heart all year, light had returned. Not dazzling, but real. A small bird landed on the windowsill, chirped once, flew away. Clara smiled, the first smile in days that didn't feel forced. She closed her eyes softly, and in the silence, she spoke, her voice trembling but calm. "Fly, Theo. Run, and don't look back. I'll still be here. But you belong to freedom. Sometimes, what we need most in life comes in the most fragile form, a lost creature, a searching gaze, a quiet call in the rain." Clara no longer kept Theo by her side. But she had learned how to let go without losing, to love without holding, and to live without needing to fill every empty space. If you've ever lost something, if there's a silence in your heart that hasn't yet healed, believe this: sometimes the forest sends us something, not to keep, but to awaken. Thank you for staying until the very end. If this story touched something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, because maybe you've just become a small part of someone else's healing journey.